Welcome my YouTube channel Storytime. If you like this story, please don't forget subscribe. It was a cold December evening in New York City. The streets were alive with the hum of rushing people, honking cars, and the distant echo of a street performer playing the violin. Amid this chaos, a man sat on the sidewalk, his frail body hunched over, clutching a tattered sign that read, "homeless veteran, hungry and cold." His name was Jack, and his presence was as invisible as the wind to the countless passers-by who barely glanced in his direction. Jack's story was one of sacrifice and loss. He had served his country with unwavering dedication, spending over a decade as a Marine. The deserts of Iraq and the rugged terrain of Afghanistan had been his home, and the battlefield his reality. He had faced bullets, bombs, and the constant threat of death, only to return to a life he no longer recognized. His medals, once a source of pride, now felt like weights tied to memories he wanted to forget. After his service, Jack had struggled to reintegrate into civilian life. The horrors of war had left scars on his mind, scars that no one could see but were deep enough to fracture his spirit. His PTSD was a relentless shadow, robbing him of sleep and peace. It led to the loss of his job, his family, and eventually his home. Now, he was just another face in the crowd, ignored, forgotten, and broken. Inside a nearby cafe, Donald J. Trump was seated, enjoying a rare moment of solitude. Known for his larger-than-life persona, Trump had always been a polarizing figure. But tonight, as he sipped his coffee and stared out the window, he wasn't thinking about politics or business. His gaze fell on Jack, sitting helplessly in the freezing cold. Something about Jack's slouched figure and the words on his sign struck a chord in Trump's heart. It was as though the man's silent suffering had reached through the glass and shaken him. Trump wasn't known for emotional gestures, but this was different. He couldn't ignore it. Without a word, Trump stood up, leaving his coffee untouched. His security detail looked at him in confusion as he signaled for them to stay put. He stepped out of the warm cafe and into the biting wind, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement as he walked toward Jack. Jack didn't notice him at first. He was too lost in his own thoughts, too accustomed to being invisible. But then, he saw the shadow of a man looming over him. Looking up, his tired eyes met the piercing gaze of a familiar face. "Are you?" Jack stammered, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. "Yes," Trump said with a faint smile. "Donald Trump. But right now, I'm just another American. May I sit?" Jack nodded hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. Trump lowered himself onto the cold sidewalk, sitting beside Jack as though they were equals. The stark contrast between them, a billionaire and a homeless veteran, was surreal. "What's your name?" Trump asked, his tone softer than Jack had expected. "Jack," he replied, his voice hoarse. "Well, Jack, I see your sign. A veteran, huh? Tell me about it." At first, Jack hesitated. He wasn't sure if this was some kind of publicity stunt or genuine interest. But there was something in Trump's demeanor that encouraged him to speak. Slowly, he began to share his story. He spoke of the battles he had fought, the friends he had lost, and the nightmares that plagued him. He talked about the struggles of returning to a world that felt alien, and how the weight of his memories had driven him to the streets. As Jack poured his heart out, Trump listened intently. For the first time in years, Jack felt like someone truly cared. When Jack finished, there was silence between them. Then Trump reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He handed it to Jack, who stared at it in disbelief. "This is for tonight," Trump said. "But I'm not done yet. You served this country with honor, Jack. Now, it's my turn to serve you." Jack's eyes welled up with tears. He wanted to say something, but the lump in his throat wouldn't let him. Trump stood up and placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Thank you for your service. Now, let me do something for you." As Trump walked away, Jack sat there, clutching the bill as though it were a lifeline. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. The next morning, Jack woke up to the same cold pavement and bustling city noise that had become his daily reality. But something felt different. The encounter from the previous night still played vividly in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of Donald Trump sitting beside him, listening to his story like he genuinely cared. It was the first time in years that someone had looked at Jack not with pity, but with respect. Clutching the $100 bill in his pocket, Jack decided to get himself a warm meal. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd had in weeks. As he walked into a small diner, heads turned briefly before resuming their usual indifference. Jack ordered a hearty breakfast and savored every bite, feeling a glimmer of normalcy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Donald Trump sat in his office, a determined expression on his face. The memory of Jack's weary eyes and trembling hands haunted him. Trump wasn't the kind of man to make empty promises, and he wasn't about to start now. "Get me the director of the local Veterans Affairs office," Trump instructed his assistant. His voice was firm, his resolve unwavering. Within hours, he had a meeting arranged. At the VA office, Trump discussed Jack's situation, emphasizing the need for immediate action. "This man served our country. He risked everything, and now he's living on the streets. How is that acceptable?" Trump's voice carried a mixture of anger and determination. The director listened, taken aback by Trump's passion. It wasn't every day that someone of his stature walked in demanding solutions for a homeless veteran. They agreed to help, promising to expedite Jack's case. But Trump wasn't done. He reached out to a few of his influential friends, businessmen and philanthropists who owed him favors. "We need to do better for our veterans," he told them. "I want to start with Jack, but this has to be bigger. These men and women deserve a second chance." By the evening, Jack had no idea that his life was about to change. As he sat on his usual spot, holding his cardboard sign, a sleek black car pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out and approached him. "Jack?" the man asked, glancing at the sign. Jack nodded warily. "Yeah, who's asking?" "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Trump. He wanted me to tell you that he hasn't forgotten about you. We've arranged temporary housing for you tonight, and tomorrow, we'll start working on something more permanent." Jack stared at the man, unable to process what he was hearing. "You're serious?" "Absolutely," the man replied. "Here's the address. A car will pick you up in an hour. Get yourself ready." For the first time in years, Jack felt a surge of hope. He thanked the man, his voice trembling with emotion. That night, Jack found himself in a modest but clean apartment. The warmth of the room felt foreign after so many cold nights on the streets. As he lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't help but think of Trump's words, "Now, let me do something for you." The next morning, Jack was taken to a VA center, where he met with a counselor. They discussed his struggles with PTSD and began drafting a plan for therapy and rehabilitation. A caseworker was assigned to help him navigate job opportunities and connect him with support groups. But the biggest surprise came later that week when Trump himself showed up at the center. Jack was in the middle of a counseling session when he heard a familiar voice. "How's my favorite Marine doing?" Trump asked, his signature grin lighting up the room. Jack stood up, shocked. "Mr. Trump. I didn't expect to see you here. I told you I wouldn't forget about you, didn't I?" Trump replied, clapping a hand on Jack's shoulder. "I came to see how you're doing and to make sure these folks are taking care of you." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He had never expected someone like Trump to follow through, let alone show up in person. Over the next hour, Trump spoke with Jack about his progress and plans. They discussed Jack's love for mechanics, a skill he had honed in the Marines, and Trump promised to connect him with a friend who ran an auto repair business. Before leaving, Trump handed Jack a small box. Inside was a medal with the words, honoring service and sacrifice. This isn't an official medal, Trump said, his voice softer than usual. But it's from me, to remind you that your service matters. And so do you. Jack's hands trembled as he held the medal. Tears streamed down his face, but for the first time, they weren't tears of despair, they were tears of gratitude and hope. That night, Jack sat in his apartment, holding the medal and reflecting on how his life had changed in just a few days. The world, which had once seemed so cold and unforgiving, now felt full of possibility. Jack's journey toward redemption began slowly but steadily. The days that followed his encounter with Donald Trump were a whirlwind of change. For the first time in years, Jack had a roof over his head, warm meals, and the reassurance that he wasn't alone. But the path to rebuilding a shattered life was far from easy. Jack's mornings now started at the VA center, where he underwent therapy sessions to confront the demons that had haunted him for years. The group sessions, filled with other veterans who shared similar struggles, became a lifeline for Jack. Listening to their stories, he realized that he wasn't alone in his pain. They spoke of battles both on and off the field, and slowly, Jack began to open up about his own. "I used to be a mechanic in the Marines," Jack shared one day. His voice, though hesitant, carried a hint of pride. "I fixed the Humvees, the tanks, even helicopters sometimes. It felt good to know I was keeping my brothers safe." One of the counselors, a kind woman named Amanda, nodded encouragingly. "That's a valuable skill, Jack. Have you thought about getting back into it?" Jack hesitated. "I'd like to, but it's been so long. I don't even know where to start." What Jack didn't know was that Donald Trump was already working behind the scenes to make that dream a reality. True to his word, Trump had contacted an old friend, Jim Anderson, who owned a successful chain of auto repair shops. Jim was a staunch supporter of veterans and had built his business by hiring and training former servicemen. "Jim," Trump said during their conversation, "I have a guy, Jack. He's a Marine, knows his way around engines, and just needs a chance. Think you can help him out?" Jim didn't hesitate. "Send him my way, Don. I'll take care of him." A week later, Jack found himself standing in front of Anderson Auto, a bustling garage filled with the sounds of clanging tools and revving engines. He was nervous, unsure if he still had what it took. But when Jim greeted him with a firm handshake and a warm smile, some of that doubt melted away. "Welcome, Jack," Jim said, gesturing toward the garage. "This is your new home, if you want it. Let's see what you've got." Jim handed Jack a set of tools and pointed to an old pickup truck that needed work. Jack's hands trembled as he opened the hood, but the moment his fingers touched the engine, muscle memory kicked in. It was as if no time had passed. Within an hour, Jack had the truck running smoothly, earning nods of approval from the other mechanics. Jim clapped him on the back. "You're a natural. You've got a job here if you want it." Jack couldn't believe his ears. For the first time in years, he felt useful, capable, and valued. He accepted the job, and with it came a renewed sense of purpose. But the journey wasn't without challenges. The weight of his past still lingered, and there were days when the memories of war threatened to pull him back into darkness. During one particularly tough night, Jack found himself staring at the medal Trump had given him. Its inscription, honoring service and sacrifice, reminded him of the promise he had made to himself, to keep fighting, no matter how hard it got. Jack threw himself into his work, earning the respect of his colleagues. His confidence grew with each passing day, and so did his determination to help others like him. He began volunteering at the VA center, speaking to younger veterans who were struggling to adjust to civilian life. One evening, as he shared his story with a group of newly discharged soldiers, a young man named Ryan approached him. "Your story gives me hope," Ryan said. "If you can turn your life around, maybe I can too." Jack placed a reassuring hand on Ryan's shoulder. "You can, Ryan. We all can. We just need to stick together. Trump continued to check in on Jack's progress, sometimes through phone calls, other times through surprise visits. During one visit to the garage, Trump watched as Jack confidently worked on a car engine. "You're a different man than the one I met on the street," Trump remarked, his tone filled with pride. Jack smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. "I had a lot of help, sir. I'll never forget what you did for me." Trump shook his head. "You're the one doing the work, Jack. I just gave you a push. The rest is all you." As Jack's life began to stabilize, he started thinking about the future. He wanted to do more than just survive, he wanted to thrive. And more importantly, he wanted to give back. One night, as he sat in his apartment, he pulled out a notebook and began jotting down ideas. He dreamed of starting a program for homeless veterans, a place where they could find shelter, job training, and support. "I know what it feels like to be forgotten," Jack thought to himself. "No one should have to go through that alone." And with that dream in mind, Jack took his first steps toward not just rebuilding his own life, but helping others find their way too. Jack's idea of creating a program for homeless veterans began as a simple thought, scribbled in the margins of a notebook late one night. But the more he worked at Anderson Auto and interacted with veterans at the VA center, the more the idea took hold. Every story he heard, of soldiers turned wanderers, of heroes forgotten, strengthened his resolve. He wanted to create a sanctuary for men and women like him, a place where they could find hope and rebuild their lives. The first step was the hardest. Jack didn't have money, connections, or any idea how to start a project of this magnitude. But what he did have was determination and the unwavering support of Donald Trump. One afternoon, during one of Trump's unannounced visits to the garage, Jack decided to share his dream. "Mr. Trump," Jack began hesitantly, wiping the grease off his hands. "I've been thinking about giving back. Starting something for guys like me. A place where homeless veterans can get a fresh start." Trump raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Tell me more." Jack hesitated, unsure if his idea was too ambitious. But as he explained his vision, a center that would provide housing, job training, therapy, and a sense of community, Trump listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "You're onto something, Jack," Trump said when Jack finished. "This isn't just a good idea, it's necessary. How can I help?" Jack was stunned. He had hoped for advice, maybe a few words of encouragement, but Trump's direct offer of help left him speechless. After a moment, he found his voice. "I don't even know where to start, sir. I've never done anything like this before." Trump leaned back, a knowing smile on his face. "That's where I come in. You don't need to have all the answers, Jack. You just need the right people to back you up. Leave the logistics to me. You focus on the vision." True to his word, Trump mobilized his network of influential friends and business partners. Within weeks, Jack found himself sitting at a conference table in a sleek Manhattan office, surrounded by philanthropists, veterans advocates, and nonprofit leaders. "This is Jack," Trump introduced him. "He's the heart and soul of this project. And we're going to make his dream a reality." The room erupted in applause, leaving Jack overwhelmed. For years, he had felt invisible, forgotten by society. Now, here he was, being treated like someone who mattered. The project, named Operation Second Chance, began to take shape. Trump's connections secured a dilapidated building on the outskirts of the city, which would be transformed into the center. Contractors offered their services at discounted rates, and local businesses donated supplies. Jack threw himself into the work, spending his evenings at the site after his shifts at the garage. He painted walls, assembled furniture, and personally greeted every volunteer who came to help. It was exhausting, but for the first time in years, Jack felt alive. As the weeks turned into months, the building transformed. What had once been an abandoned structure now stood as a beacon of hope. The walls were adorned with murals painted by local artists, depicting scenes of unity and resilience. Dormitory-style rooms provided clean, comfortable spaces for residents. There was a workshop where veterans could learn skills like woodworking and mechanics, a therapy center staffed by professionals, and a large common room where they could gather and build camaraderie. The grand opening of Operation Second Chance was a day Jack would never forget. Veterans from all over the city gathered, many still living on the streets, drawn by the promise of help and hope. Local news stations covered the event, and Trump himself gave a heartfelt speech. "This isn't just a building," Trump said, addressing the crowd. "It's a second chance for those who've given everything for this country. And it's because of one man's vision, Jack's vision, that we're standing here today." When it was Jack's turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling. He looked out at the sea of faces, many filled with the same pain he had once carried. "I'm not a hero," Jack began. "I'm just a man who got lost and found his way back, thanks to someone who believed in me. And now, I want to do the same for you. This place is for all of us. A place where we can heal, grow, and start over." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time, Jack allowed himself to feel pride, not just for what he had accomplished, but for the lives he knew would be changed. As the first residents moved into the center, Jack took on a mentorship role, guiding them through their recovery and helping them find jobs. Every success story became a reminder of why he had started this journey. Trump continued to support the center, often visiting unannounced to check on its progress. During one such visit, he and Jack stood outside, watching a group of veterans laughing and working on a gardening project. "Look at that," Trump said, his voice filled with satisfaction. "That's your legacy, Jack." Jack shook his head. "It's ours, sir. I couldn't have done this without you." Trump smiled. "You're a good man, Jack. Never forget that." Jack nodded, his heart full. He had found his purpose, and in doing so, he had helped others find theirs. Months turned into years, and Operation Second Chance became more than just a center, it became a symbol of hope and transformation. What started as Jack's dream had grown into a community of veterans, staff, and supporters, all united by a shared goal, to rebuild lives. Jack's days were full but fulfilling. He split his time between managing the center, mentoring the residents, and working with local organizations to expand their outreach. He had become a voice for veterans, often speaking at events, advocating for better policies, and inspiring others with his story. But life wasn't without its challenges. Jack's past still lingered in the shadows, and there were moments when the weight of his memories threatened to pull him under. Late at night, he sometimes found himself staring out of his apartment window, reflecting on the years he had spent lost and broken. It was during one of these quiet moments that a knock at his door startled him. He opened it to find Donald Trump standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need a late-night pick-me-up," Trump said, handing Jack one of the cups. Jack chuckled, inviting him in. "You always show up when I least expect it, sir." Trump sat down, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "I wanted to check on you, Jack. I know the work you're doing is incredible, but I also know it's not easy. How are you holding up?" Jack hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "I'm okay," he said finally. "Better than I've ever been, really. But some nights, it's still hard." Trump nodded, his eyes reflecting a rare softness. "That's normal, Jack. You've been through more than most people can imagine. But look at what you've built. Look at the lives you've changed. That's your strength." Jack smiled, appreciating the words. "I wouldn't be here without you, sir. You gave me a second chance. And you've done more with it than anyone could have expected," Trump replied. "Never forget that." Their conversation left Jack feeling lighter, more grounded. It reminded him that even the strongest people need support, and that it was okay to lean on others when the weight became too much. As the years passed, Operation Second Chance expanded, opening additional centers across the country. Jack traveled to oversee the new locations, ensuring they stayed true to the mission. Each center was filled with stories of transformation, veterans finding jobs, reconnecting with their families, and reclaiming their sense of purpose. One such story belonged to Ryan, the young man who had approached Jack during one of his early mentoring sessions. With Jack's guidance, Ryan had gone from struggling with homelessness to becoming a skilled carpenter. Now, he worked full-time at the center, teaching other veterans the trade that had saved him. "Jack," Ryan said one day, as they worked on a new project together, "I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't met you. This place, it's everything to me." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You did the work, Ryan. I just pointed you in the right direction." Stories like Ryan's became the foundation of Jack's legacy. But for Jack, it wasn't about recognition or accolades. It was about ensuring that no veteran ever felt the way he once had, forgotten, invisible, and without hope. Years later, at a ceremony honoring his contributions to veterans' welfare, Jack stood on a stage in front of a packed audience. Among them was Donald Trump, seated in the front row, his face beaming with pride. The event was filled with tributes, testimonials, and heartfelt speeches. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he stepped up to the podium, holding back tears as he looked out at the crowd. "I stand here today not because of my own strength, but because of the strength of the people who believed in me," Jack began. "There was a time when I thought my life was over, that I had no purpose. But one act of kindness changed everything." He paused, his eyes meeting Trump's. "Mr. Trump, you saw me when no one else did. You didn't just give me money, you gave me hope. And that hope became the foundation for everything we've built together." The audience erupted in applause, but Jack wasn't finished. "To my fellow veterans," he continued, his voice steady, "this journey isn't just about me. It's about all of us. We've faced battles that most people can't imagine, but we've also proven that we're stronger than our struggles. This center, this community, it's proof that we can rise again." As the crowd stood in a standing ovation, Jack felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found his purpose, and in doing so, he had helped countless others find theirs. In the years that followed, Jack continued his work, dedicating his life to the mission of Operation Second Chance. The centers became a nationwide movement, transforming the lives of thousands of veterans. Jack's story was one of redemption, resilience, and the power of kindness. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, a single act of compassion could spark a chain of events that changed the world. And for Jack, that world was one filled with hope, purpose, and the unshakable belief that no one was ever truly lost. If you like Donald Trump, please like, subscribe and share. Thank you for watching my YouTube channel Storytime.